All right, y'all thought that I might be fibbing. This is proof right now. The Letterman podcast. We have one sponsor only, but it is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Thank you very much for sponsoring our show, Rupert.
It's my honor, Mike.
La, 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 la. Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I love today's episode, and I know you say that every time, Mike. Yeah, well, I love the show. You know, it's good that the host of the Letterman podcast loves the show, loves doing the show, loves the conversations that we have. Believe me, it's not because of me. I love it because of the guests that we have. And today is certainly an example of that. George Rothweiler is on today, a cameraman for the CBS network for decades, almost 5 of them. 47 years this guy was a cameraman for the Tiffany Network. And this conversation that we have, and then of course 22 of those years for Late Show with David Letterman. He was a guy that would run the handheld. He wasn't one of the original full-timers that was there, but was a guy that was brought in by Hal Gurney. And then of course that legacy continued on by the late great Jerry Foley. We haven't had a real tribute episode to Jerry since he passed. I know that we've got some previous episodes, Amy Sharon Humes and Tim Kennedy, among others, talking a lot about Jerry before he passed. But this episode here, boy, George does a wonderful job talking about how he felt for Jerry, and that's a fantastic part of this episode. He talks about we talk about 9/11. We actually recorded this episode on 9/11, and we talked about how he went from Sunday night winning the Emmy in California to a couple of days later, the atrocity that happened in New York, and of course Late Show's place in that history from an entertainment, from a broadcasting perspective, and from a moving on perspective for the rest of the world. We talk about that. But then also he does such a good job talking about the role of a camera operator. And is it the same for doing a Super Bowl? Because he did them all from Super Bowl 12 on. Or maybe it's Super Bowl 14, I forget which one, but the early Super Bowls, and he did them on. Is it the same being a camera operator for a Super Bowl than it is for Late Show? We talk about that. And many other very cool stories behind the scenes of Late Show with David Letterman. This is a fantastic conversation. I'm going to shut up now and we're just going to get to it. The Letterman podcast is extremely proud to present my conversation with veteran, journeyman, learning tree, George Rothweiler. Okay, George. The tech guys, I've constantly said the tech guys, the cameramen, the utilities, the audio guys, all these people who are the professionally invisible people who are behind the scenes. You guys are the ones who knows where the bodies are buried when it comes to the things that happen on these shows. I'm very, very excited you've taken time out to be here today. Your career, it's funny because Late Night or Late Show with David Letterman came into your life, but it's not like you didn't have a massive career. You've shot some awesome stuff along the way before Late Night came in, or Late Show came in. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. How did you get into the business?
Well, I graduated high school in 1972. Instead of going on to college, I went to a broadcasting school in New York City, RCA Institutes, which is a pretty, was a quick course. It was only for 4 months. And I graduated June of 72, started RCA Institute September of 72, graduated December of 72. My first job was at New Jersey Public Television, February of 73, worked there as a trainee or an intern.
Yeah.
They put me on at $2 an hour. It was a state-funded station. And then one of my buddies who had left the station said CBS was hiring. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. I was 21 years old at the time that I applied at CBS. I started New Jersey Network at 19, and I was one of the youngest guys hired at CBS. And it was funny, during the interview process, I said, the only difference between where I am today and where I hope to be tomorrow at CBS is how much you're going to pay me. Because what you do for a director there is the same that I would do for a director at the network. It doesn't change anything. It's like when we do Super Bowls, all the young guys who get nervous about doing a Super Bowl, and I always told them, there's 3 things that change at a Super Bowl: the pregame, the halftime, and the wrap-up show.
Yep.
once a game starts, nothing changes. You still have to do the same job you've done for 17 weeks of an NFL season, or if you're doing a Final Four or a World Series game, you still got to do the same job. It's all the hoopla that surrounds the event. So I got to CBS at 21, one of the youngest guys there, and the career just started. A lot of those veteran guys who were World War II veterans were great. They were all my father's ages. They were 55 and above, and I was the little, redheaded kid at 21-year-old coming in there and eyes wide open. And I love sports. So at that time, we did everything. I did Captain Kangaroo. I did some game shows and a few soap operas, but primarily it was sports on the weekend.
Yep.
So when the rumor was that Letterman was coming over, I didn't know anything about David. I was a Johnny Carson guy. I watched his show for decades. And but the thing about Letterman was I heard that his director, and I didn't even know who his director was. Well, obviously now was Hal Gurney, was going to interview a camera crew. And I thought, I would love to be interviewed by this gentleman because I found out his background. And I said, well, let's see if I could go toe to toe with him to see if my knowledge of the business can match his knowledge that he came from.
Yeah.
And one of the vice presidents found out that I wanted to do the interview, did not want to do the show because I knew nothing about Letterman. I didn't know what it really looked like or if it was funny. I didn't know anything about it, but I wanted to be interviewed by this senior veteran director. And they denied the request. And I guess they were afraid that with the clout that Letterman had coming over from NBC, that they could virtually pick and choose who they wanted on their show since they spent all that money. So didn't have the interview, but they were so busy. They were bringing extra guys. They were doing a lot of things on 53rd Street, Rupert G's. I mean, all around Manhattan. They really got really into the neighborhood and wanted to build friendships with people. And I was sent over there quite a few times. And, Hal liked what I was doing, and they brought me back whenever I was available and they needed extra people. And then it just went from there.
I really love what you said earlier about how, nothing changes. You're dealing with the director, you're dealing with, the gig is the same no matter what. Is that something you learned along the way, or is that something that a mentor taught you back during your formative years?
To me, it was just common sense.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, the only difference between New Jersey Public Television and the network was how much they were going to pay me.
Yeah.
The work stayed the same.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that interviewed me just kind of smiled, and he knew that I was right. Nothing changed. And I never felt the pressure of coming to the network because I knew what I had to do on camera. A camera operator, I used to say camera man, but no, that's no longer the case because we have some very fine ladies who do cameras now. That it's a lot of common sense, and your loyalty to your director is paramount.
Yeah. It's
you
interesting.
You have to build that relationship and trust.
Well, okay. And we're going to get to relationship and trust from a director to a camera person or a camera operator. We're definitely going to get to that because, when you think about Late Show and the breakneck speed and all of the spontaneity that would happen with it, you're not the only one who did camera for Late Show who came from a sports background. And part of that is because of the industry, of course. You go where you're supposed to go. CBS, of course, has a long storied history with sport. So, I mean, obviously that's a big part of it. But at the same time, I believe that having people who were experienced working in sports with all of the spontaneous things that could happen within a game was certainly part of the secret sauce as to why Late Show was such a unique and amazing program, because really the spontaneity was a huge part of that.
Well, the main camera guys on the Late Show, who did the pedestal cameras, they had done sports a little bit over the years, but the handheld guys, myself, Flaherty, Al Cellino, John Curtin, Fred Shimizu, and John Hannell, just to name a couple of the handheld guys that Jerry Foley, who eventually took over, rotated us all in. We were sports guys. So we're used to doing things live and reacting in a split second.
Yep.
So I guess Jerry embraced that a lot. I make reference to Jerry a lot because I did 20 years with Jerry and maybe two, not a lot of shows with Hal before he retired. And I guess Jerry liked to have the mini guys do sports because they're so quick to react to things, because you never know when Dave's going to say something about Rupert G or sign outside, and they quickly run outside to get it. I mean, in early, the last few years, I was up in the balcony doing the opening of the show, and Dave was taking questions from the audience, and one woman asked him, "How come you don't throw stuff off the roof anymore?" Oh my God. And all of a sudden, everybody scattered like ants. The utility guys were getting cables to run outside. And when we started the show, next thing you know, they're up on the roof. With Farmer throwing the stuff off the roof. We had cameras out in the street. In a matter of minutes, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. But because of the experience of the utilities, the camera assistants, they had everything blocked out. They knew what cables to grab, plexiglass for us to stand behind, because sometimes they throw paint off the roof, and there's all sorts of stuff. One time they dropped off 1,000 of those little tiny Super Balls, and they were bouncing all down 53rd Street. So, we reacted to a lot of things, and Jerry had a good crew. Everybody on that camera crew really wanted to be there, in my opinion, and that helps the director out a lot.
You mentioned it earlier, the consummate professionals, and that's what you all were. You were, there, that production required nothing less than people to be the top level and professionals. Before we kind of move into late show stuff, I'm super curious about some of the things, the highlights of things in your career that you shot before that. You were part of some pretty big events before you had that the assignments to start going over to the Ed Sullivan Theater. You had shot some pretty cool stuff along the way. What are some of the things that stick in your mind of things that you've shot over your life, George?
Well, out of all the staff guys at the network, I think I've done more Super Bowls than anybody. I've done every Super Bowl. Did I lose you?
No, I'm good. I'm listening.
Okay. No, I just don't see it for some reason.
Oh,
let me see what I did. Okay, I'm back.
No, you're crystal clear on my end. How many Super Bowls did you do, and what was the first one? Do you remember?
The first one was Super Bowl XII in New Orleans. It was the Dallas Cowboys against the Denver Broncos, Super Bowl XII. And I've done every Super Bowl since Super Bowl XII with 2 or 3 different directors over those years. And again, to me, a Super Bowl is just like a regular game. It was just a hoopla. I did the NBA Finals all during the early 70s, when it wasn't a very popular event, until Magic and Larry Bird showed up. And I did all the NBA Finals, Boston, LA, and Boston and Detroit, all during the 80s.
Wow.
I did figure skating for a lot of years, baseball World Series. So, I was pretty well-rounded. The Late Show to me was, in a lot of respects, pretty easy. You come in there and everybody gives you a lot of advice what to do and what not to do. But, basically listen to the director, listen to the show, and see where it's heading. Because there were times where I always felt David throwing curveballs at Jerry, and I want to make sure Jerry went 2 for 3 against them, to be at the right place at the right time. And, but no, I've had a very good career, along with many other of my staff colleagues. We had a great rounded career.
So are you a football fan?
I'm a sports fan. I was a baseball player for years, but you have to love sports. And if you know sports, it's going to make everything so much easier for the director and a producer, because you have the instincts to know where to be at what time, because you played those sports. Where in the first generation technicians were, like I said, was our World War II veterans who came to CBS in the 50s.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the opportunity to play the sports like a lot of us who came 75, 80, and 85. Yeah. We played the sports, so we knew the mechanics of what could happen during an event, which makes for a better show. Because, nowadays, with all the videotape replays and the amount of massive cameras you have on these events, it makes the camera operators, you have to be perfect, because you can make a difference in a win or a loss for a team.
Yep.
If you're not there for that coverage, or you're out of focus.
Yeah.
Don't be out of focus.
Okay, so let's talk before Late Show comes over. You're working for CBS. You're a CBS guy. And that network, the Tiffany network, had gone through all sorts of ups and downs and all sorts of stuff. Do you remember the feeling? Do you remember where you were when you heard that David Letterman was coming over to CBS?
You know what? I have no idea where I was or anything like that because, like I said, I wasn't a Letterman fan. I didn't know much about him.
Yeah.
His show was on at 12:30. I was always in bed a lot earlier than that. So,
Yeah.
like I said, the only thing I ever heard was that the director was going to interview and that they were redoing the Ed Sullivan Theater because
Yep.
that theater had gone in and out of ownerships over the years that I was there. Kate and Allie were in there. We did a game show in there. CBS owned it. CBS didn't own it. And then next, our construction engineer people are over there gutting the whole building and getting it ready for Letterman.
So you shot stuff
That's
in
how
the
it
Ed
all
Sullivan
kind of
Theater.
unfolded.
So you shot stuff in the Ed Sullivan Theater beforehand.
I did one game show called I don't know, musical chairs, I think it was. It didn't last very long, but that was it. That was the one show that I ever did over there. Then I went to ABC. Howard Cosell did a show out of there. Like I
Yeah.
said, Kate and Allie were
Yeah.
done there,
Yeah.
and that was the extent of my visibility at that a studio until
Yeah.
I got in there.
Okay, but at the same time, you may not remember where you were when it happened, but there must have been a lot of buzz about Letterman coming over. At that point there, what did your typical day look like? Like, were you always, in the Northeast, go to the broadcast center every day, look at your assignments? Is that what the day would be? And then suddenly after Late Show started, you started seeing these assignments where you were being called over there. Would you be called over there spontaneously? How did things change for you when Letterman did come over to CBS?
Well, normally we were on a 5-day work week then. So my days off were Tuesday and Wednesday, and Thursday I was in the broadcast center. Normally when you're traveling, you'd be traveling on a Friday to your football weekend.
Yep.
And we pick up our per diem slips and our airline tickets. And pretty much we were unassigned that day. And because Letterman was doing so many things, the schedule desk would send over a couple of camera guys or audio guys or whatever the needs of the show were at that time. And I would just go over. And it happened more and more. And really, that's how it really developed. Then I'd go out Friday, I'd travel to the football and come back on Monday. And sometimes they'd call me, on my days off to do the show.
Yep.
And then I'd have maybe Wednesday off, then Thursday I'd be back in the broadcast center and could be assigned to Letterman if they had it extra people. If not, I would do other things, whatever they needed me to do.
I get into the weeds go ahead. Please, yeah, please.
I was going to say we were all unassigned in the field group. So we weren't assigned to a show weekly because they knew we're going out of town on Friday. And if you're doing a soap opera, they want the regular people to do it.
No, that makes sense. Okay. I get into the weeds on this stuff. I'm fascinated by all the little details when it comes to this stuff. Okay. So on a Wednesday, you're off, you're sitting up, you're having your coffee in the morning, you get a phone call saying, hey, they need you at the Ed Sullivan Theater today. Are you the guy that goes to the broadcast center to get the camera? Is the camera there already? Are you a guy that how does that all work?
Well, the equipment's already there. I'll give you a story. I'm still living in Jersey at the time, and it was a very, very snowy day. I mean, we hit over a foot of snow, and I'm outside. My driveway was 80 foot long. I had my snow thrower out there, and it was a Wednesday or Tuesday, and I clean off the driveway. I was just sitting down to have breakfast. And then a call comes in from Bob Feller, who's the production manager over there, said, a couple of guys can't make it in. Can you get in? And I went, all right, if I can get my Jeep out of my cul-de-sac, I know the rest of the roads will be clear. Well, I did that and I drove all the way in. So I said to him, where do I park my car? He says, don't worry about it. We'll park it on 53rd Street because a lot of our security were New York City detectives, retired and whatnot. So my car parked on 53rd Street. I did the show. And that night, I was on the roof of the Ed Sullivan Theater shooting bumper shots down Broadway in a snowstorm. But that was my job because I did football games in Green Bay where it was 20 below zero.
Yep.
Or up in Foxborough doing a game where the weather's horrible or rainy. When you're a cameraman, you're like a mailman who has a viewfinder that have to deliver pictures in all sorts of weather. So if you're a cameraman, you really can't complain about the weather. That's your job, whether you're doing a golf tournament in Miami in 90-degree temperature or you're doing a football game where it's 20 below zero. So I'm on the roof. I do the bumper shots for a whole hour, give the camera to my camera assistant. He packs it away. I go outside, get in my car, and I drive home. I drove down to the Lincoln Tunnel, no traffic. Through the Lincoln Tunnel, no traffic. New Jersey Turnpike, no traffic. It was like I owned the whole roads because nobody was out driving, and I drove home. So there were many times where they were calling me so much on my 2 days off that when I woke up, my wife says, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know, but you never know." Sure enough, a phone call would come in and they'd see if I was available to work that day.
Um,
And that wasn't
and
just me. That was the guys who had the same scenario.
absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that. Okay, so I love the analogy of the mailman. That's so cool. You seem like, and I mean, it's all the years, of course. I mean, you've got you're just literally spouting out wisdom here. Do you ever get called by any broadcast schools or anything like that to come in and do any teaching? You'd seem like you'd be a really good teacher, George.
It's funny. I was one of my neighbors, they had a career day and he knew a teacher in a school in New Jersey. And they were bringing in different people from different companies. And he asked me to come in. So I came in and it was a sixth grade class. And you know what? The first question everybody asked me was, "How much do you make?" But that was from sixth grade kids. "How much do you make?" And I said, "That's good." So we had a nice conversation. The kids were great. And this one little girl in the back of the room says, one last question. "Are you married?" And I said, "Yes." And the entire class shifted and looked at the teacher. Like the kids are trying to fix me up with the school teacher, which I thought was so cool. Um,
And
but
they're
no, to
vetting.
answer your
How much do
question,
you make? How much do
I've
you
never
make?
been
Are you
asked to,
worthy of this going to this teacher? They ask how
yeah,
much you make. Yeah, I do okay. Great. Hey, do you want to hang?
it's amazing what these kids ask. But it's funny. If I was going to talk to anybody who wanted to come into the industry, I would just tell them a little bit about my background
Yep.
and what I did. Because
Yep.
a lot of times a teacher would come in and they'll have a scripted what they're going to teach that day, but they may never hit the talking points that you want. And you may be too afraid to ask a question. So I would tell them about my background, how I started, how I came up. And there's no clear path to get to where you want to be. Everybody achieves a certain status taking a different avenue. And I would ask them, "What questions do you have for me?" So you ask me any question you want. If I can't give you the right answer, maybe I can help you get the right answer from another resource, because certainly I don't have all the answers.
Yeah. I uh I imagine that you worked with a lot of people who were your junior. I mean, you came into this thing, you worked with a lot of people your senior. And that's very much, by the way, the Letterman sensibility. When Dave got his original show, there were a lot of, young cutting edge writers and things like that. But then there's also some people like Hal Gurney. You mentioned Hal Gurney. I mean, he's a legend now, like an absolute legend in broadcasting. The guy worked with Parr, with Jack Parr. I mean, oh my gosh. And Jack Rollins, we talk about Jack Rollins, Dave's legendary manager, and some of these people that have been around for a long, long time. But then there were these young people, and there was this kind of alchemy or this chemistry of these people who were together. You kind of went through your career going from talking to the old guys who had been around for a long time, and then you got to the place where you became a veteran in this thing and you saw younger people coming up. um Pretty neat perspective when it comes to that. I'm super curious as to what has changed and what stayed the same.
Well, the thing that changed was the industry went to more of a freelance hiring process. So once this current staff guys were in, as they retired or left, they were replaced by freelance and per diems. So I didn't have the opportunity to have a lot of young guys coming in behind me because that door was being closed. But I
Gotcha.
met a lot of freelancers as a cameraman supervisor on remotes where I would set up a football stadium and we'd hire local utilities to help. And I would have to train them and motivate them and have them understand how we do it at our network, which could be a different way of doing things than, say, NBC,
Yeah.
ESPN, or ABC.
Yeah.
And those are the younger ones that I met over the years. And, we spoke about a lot of things. I was asked a lot of questions over the years of my experiences, and I try to share it with them. I just give them what I went through, and hopefully they can have the same positive career path that I had. You want to build friends and relationships. In this business, not everybody's going to like you.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you're
To
preaching to
me,
the
I
choir
was,
on that one, George. You're preaching to the choir on
yeah,
that one. Yeah.
you hope everybody likes you. And it hurts when you find out, well, this guy really doesn't like you, because as good as you are, people are going to be jealous of your success and wish that they had that same opportunity. And I always tell younger people, Johnny Brown may not like you, but the thing that they can never take away from you is what you do in your craft area. If you do a good job on camera, Just do a good job on camera. And you don't have to brag about your camera work. Your directors and producers will do all the talking that needs to be done. Try to be humble, but be good in your craft, because that's one area that they can never take it away from you.
Oh my God. It's just the advice is just coming out of you, the wisdom of these years as we reflect on this stuff. I want to start moving into Letterman stuff now. Okay, so you're used to you by the time Late Show started production at the Ed Sullivan Theater, you have this body of work, this body of experience. You have these instincts that you're talking about. You have this, unflappable mindset. It doesn't matter. I'm just still doing the same job every day. I'm the mailman doing the same job every day, no matter what the environment is, no matter what the show is. Fantastic. You then start getting sent over to the Ed Sullivan Theater. Early memories of this? Are there anything that pops into your head of, oh my gosh, that's one of the strangest things I've shot, or that's a little bit outside the box of what I've been doing over the years early on. This is going to be a bit of a different adventure. Anything like that?
No, not really. I went over there with eyes wide open.
Yep.
Not really thinking what's going to happen. I just let it develop, as any good sports cameraman would do, or a live cameraman, because it's never planned. It's just going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing things out on 53rd Street, and Dave knew most of his crew members. He didn't know me early on.
Yep.
And we were doing a show close on 53rd Street,
Mm-hmm.
and I was out there, and they wanted Dave to close to my camera. Well, when he looked at me, he was stunned because he didn't know me. But standing maybe 5 feet away from me was a cameraman that he worked with at NBC, Joe DeBonis.
Yep.
And he immediately swung to Joe for the show close. Some camera operators would be really pissed that he didn't do it. I understood it. He didn't know me from Adam. He wasn't sure. So he went to what he thought was the right person to go to. And in hindsight, he did do the right thing. I wasn't upset about it. I totally get it. Because, he sees 100 camera guys all the time out in the street. He's not friends with everybody, because it's tough to get to know a lot of us, because we're in and out.
Yeah.
Off and on, and it is what it is. But no, nothing. They put me in some weird positions, like we discussed yesterday. About one time I was on a ice skating rink. They had Don Hewitt, I believe he was a stunt coordinator, and Dave's talking to Paul Schaefer about what's going on the hockey rink, and I'm out there in front of the net, and I hear Paul say to Dave, "Why doesn't he just shoot at the camera operator?" Well, when that happened, I didn't know if I was on air or not, because in the studio, you have a red tally light come on and you're on the air, but on these remote cameras, you don't get that. Yep. So when Paul said, hit the camera guy, I instinctively, without thinking, went, no, no, no. Well, then I hear the audience laughing because they didn't expect me to do this, but I did because I didn't want to get hit with the puck. So that was an interesting position to be put in.
Was that Hal or was that Jerry? Do you remember?
No, that was Jerry.
That was Jerry. Okay.
Yeah,
so, that's where, the genius of that show, where they would have members of the crew, in this case, a member of the equipment, become a character within the show. And that was one of the genius parts of what Dave and company did, was they would have moments like that where they would give you little teeny tiny moments to be part of the show. That is a perfect Letterman moment that you just described.
Again, it was unplanned. I was down with Rupert G at Shark River down the Jersey Shore, and I don't even remember what the bit was, but he's on camera, and behind him is the Shark River, and behind him is coming this wave runner, and you could see him, he's boogieing, and I hear Dave go, "Hey, hey, hey, hey." Instinctively, I just did a nice slow zoom past Rupert and picked up the wave runner and followed the conclusion, and I widened back out to bring Rupert back in the shot. Well, Jerry Foley thought it was the greatest thing since white rice, because instinctively I went to that because I figured Dave likes those zany things. So I just went with it. And again, all these little things that I might have done early on, the production people liked, because it's all instinctive. Foley liked it. He didn't have to direct it. All he had to do was select it. And that's not a knock on his ability as a director. I can't comment much about Hal because I only worked with him a few times. When I did work with him early on, Jerry was a technical director on the show. So the day that I was assigned here for 2 straight days, Jerry introduced me to Hal and says, this is George Rothweiler. He's going to be with us for 2 days. And Hal says to him, well, let's see how he does today. So I said, that was pretty funny. We had a chuckle and off we went. And after my second day, as we were just ending the show, Hal said to me, George, come back anytime, which made me feel good because, all right, I have a new director in my corner. He knows that I could do the show. When and if he wants to utilize me, that's his call. But when he does the call, hopefully I'll be ready to do it. And that holds true for Foley also.
And we're going to get to Jerry here. Did you meet Mr. Dorsett right away? Did you know him very long before?
Oh, I spoke to David last night.
Oh, did you?
We had our, yes, I did. He's coming up to 90 years old.
Yeah.
He has slowed down. His mind is still pretty sharp. When I first came to CBS at 21, Dave was one of those guys who started maybe early 60s. Friend to everybody, $1 million smile, always in good spirits. He and I would run like hell after the show was over down to Port Authority. We could probably get down there from 53rd to Port Authority in about 8 minutes. Yep. We were hustling. Dave was beloved by everybody. Letterman loved him. He was like a little kid. He was the senior member of our crew. He was in his 60s. And when the scripts would come down to put him in bits, he was like a little kid. He'd get very nervous. And he'd read me his part and we would chuckle about it. And when it came to shooting it, Dave must have liked it because it was so innocent, his reaction to a lot of things. But Dave was one of those guys, very supportive of the new guys coming into the industry, would always give us helpful advice. And that was the good thing about all those veteran guys. They were helpful. We were the Tiffany Network for a reason. Yeah. We always took care within our circle. Would there be skirmishes within the circle like any family? Of course it would be. But overall, they were there to help you get through. And that Tiffany name to me is very important because of the class that when I came on board, they told me how to dress when we travel, how we interact with people on the road, because we represented the CBS television network. And that was important to those first generation guys. But as time went on, you could see how the dress code had changed when the freelance world came into our world, because they dress a certain way and the network guys, staff guys dressed the other way. So it has changed over the years. But getting back to Dave, he was so supportive. Everybody loved him on the show. I don't know how much more I can say about the guy. He's just top notch.
Had you worked with him at all before Late Show?
Oh, yeah. He used to do the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And I was assigned there one day as a utility. And I sat behind Dave's camera. And I kept thinking to myself, boy, if my third or fourth or fifth grade teacher could see me now sitting 10 feet away from Walter Cronkite. Think about it. When you're in grammar school, you see all these World War II videos with Walter doing a voiceover. And here I am working with Walter Cronkite. It's like, all right, that's pretty cool. See, I got used to working with all these big time celebrities when I was 21, 22 years old. That holds true to John Madden and Pat Summerall and all the sports gods. You know, they become your friends after a while. You work with them so often, they're just like one of the guys. And but to sit there with Walter Cronkite was kind of cool. And Dave had worked with Walter for years, and you know, you could see the interaction between them. They were friends, which is important. Hopefully, in this industry, you pick up a few friends along the line.
Well, it feels like there is very much like a brotherhood with, I mean, if you call it, it's not just the union guys, but you're Fox, you're literally, to use a war analogy, you're foxhole buddies with each other. And you might as well be friends, because it's going to be pretty miserable in that foxhole if you're not getting along.
Oh, yeah.
And while the action is coming in, you've got to perform, right? So you might as well be at a place where, and you use this word a few times. You use the word trust. And it's the idea of you being someone that the director can count on, that the show can count on, that you're not going to get out of focus. In your case, as the handheld guy, you know, having those instincts that you're talking about, that word trust really, really is important in many different aspects of what it was that you were doing.
Well, if I do a lousy job on camera, it reflects the director. In this industry, the directors have always selected we'll just talk about camera for now.
Sure.
They select their camera for their instinct and their desire. I mentioned yesterday to you, Biff Henderson went in for a meniscus knee operation, and Jerry assigned me to shoot it.
Yep.
Prior to the operation, we did all the taping with the doctor beforehand at the hospital and whatnot. But the day of the shoot, I made sure my lens was clean, the camera was ready to go, fresh batteries. And once I got into the operating room, I was on my own. Jerry didn't direct me because, like my sports directors,
Yeah.
he knew what he had. And I'm not the only camera guy. He had a couple other camera guys in his stable, Al Chelino and so on, who could do the job also. But he didn't have to direct me. He
Yeah.
trusted me, and I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let him down, and I couldn't let myself down. Camera operators love their directors 99% of the time, and our job is to make them happy, pure and simple. You may not always like your director, but you're like Leroy Neiman. Every camera operator paints a different picture.
Yeah.
They have a certain style that they shoot, instinct on what they do. And it was funny because during the operation, I'm kind of peering out of my viewfinder to see where Jerry is. And Jerry, the segment producer, and my camera assistant, they were looking at the monitor as the surgeon was cutting the leg. And it was funny, on Biff's leg, they put an X where they were going to do the incision. So I was happened to be around that side, and I see this X. I do a nice, comfortable zoom down to the X. And just as I got to where I was going to stop, the doctor went in with the scalpel.
Oh,
And, it cut the knee open.
perfect.
And Letterman likes that kind of gory stuff. He just loved it. So when I saw the finished product, I went, wow, they actually used that, and it was pretty good. Now people say, well, did you get sick when you saw the blood? Back then we had black and white viewfinders. They weren't color viewfinders. So
Oh.
it was just black and white. So it wasn't as dramatic as it might have been in later years where we had color viewfinders.
You know what?
So,
That's okay. Oh, go ahead. No, please keep going.
no, I got nothing else.
All right. Okay. Man, there's a couple places that I want to go with that, but no, I want to go to the heart place. You know, we talk about Jerry, and I mean, we've had a couple of tribute episodes that ended up kind of being tribute episodes to him. Um, Jerry was going to come on this show. We had talked about it, and I'll tell you this, George, because I know you have the respect for Jerry professionally and personally. And I mean, I worship the guy. I mean, the guy took over for Hal Gurney. I can't even imagine being in the pressure cooker that Jerry Foley was. The pressure cooker of Late Show with David Letterman was absolutely incredible. And there's probably 5 or 6 people that I think of that were probably at the epicenter of that pressure who had more than anybody. Jerry certainly in that place. And I'll tell you, I don't think I've said this publicly. We had talked in person a couple of times at Shecky's memorial, and we talked at Rupert's retirement party, and we had traded back a whole bunch of emails. Shecky was one of the first people he connected me with was Jerry Foley, and we started going back and forth, and this is something that he said to me a couple of times. He said, Mike, I will do the show, but I'm just not ready yet for the Mike Chisholm treatment. That's what he said to me. I'm not ready for the Mike Chisholm treatment yet. And it delighted me to no end to hear Jerry Foley say that to me. In the fall we saw each other at Rupert's thing, and then early in the winter we traded. He was gonna come on, and then unfortunately, tragically, he passed away. And I mean, what a blow. And he passed away on the same day, 1 year later than Shecky passed away. And I mean, it's just on the same day. And I mean, you talk about a giant. You talk about somebody who's a giant who is professionally invisible. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the director of anything David Letterman has ever done was visible, was a part of the show so much more than any other director, say for Carson or other people like Cavett, other people along the way. But you've got this guy who took over for a legend and made the show his own. And then he had these people like yourself who had this unbelievable desire to make Jerry look good. And I know that you and many of the other people who served under him felt that way. Let's talk for a little bit about Jerry Foley.
Jerry, sometimes it's tough to talk about it.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to his memorial. It hurt that much.
Yeah.
Because the guy was very loyal. to a lot of people. Yeah, like I said, directors aren't liked by everybody.
Yep.
But for the cameramen, there's a certain bond that we had with them. You know, the loyalty is a two-way street from him to me and me to him.
Yep.
And I realized right from the get-go that he was under a lot of pressure that a lot of us in the trenches probably didn't see, but could feel what goes on upstairs. You know, we'll never know what that's all about. But his goal was always to make David look good and make the show look good. He would take a beat. There were times on headset, he'd say, "Oh, I'm going to hear about this later." And that always bothered me because my job was always to be prepared that would never give Dave an opportunity to pick on Jerry for not getting something. I had a good camera assistant in Stevie Kaufman. Unfortunately, he passed away.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
This guy would always, we'd have a talk before the show. I'd ask him, do we have enough cable to get out to Rupert G? Do we have enough cable? If we had to go across the stage out the stage door to get something, do we have enough cable to get in the back? And he always made sure that I was prepared because you just never know what Dave's going to say. Expect the unexpected, right? And he'd say something about Rupert G or a poster that's across the street on 53rd Street. Well, when I heard that, we would run like hell to get outside. And Jerry appreciated that. And in the eyes of Letterman, go, wow, how'd they get it so fast? How'd they even know I was going to say that? Yeah. We were there to cover Jerry's butt. And he knew that and he appreciated that. You know, there were times where he might get a little upset, but all directors get upset and yell. He just sometimes can't take it personal.
Yeah.
And with Jerry, he was loyal. He would call me once I retired. He would meet with Tim Kennedy and Ron McGugan's a graphics operator for, you know, have a cigar and some wine. And they'd always send me a picture saying, man, another one you couldn't make. And I'd send him a picture. I'd send him a picture back of my Emmys. And I said, I would have been there, but I had to do some dusting. So we always had that little toddy between one another. Or he'd say to me, we're due for our yearly chit chat. He'd say to me, we're only going to talk once a year.
Yeah.
But with that said, I get calls from him to do other freelance stuff, which I was really unavailable to do it. Yeah. By the time I retired, after 47 years, I still had the strength and the instincts to do the show, but I was missing one important ingredient: desire.
Yeah. The
desire to carry that camera. I'm still in good shape. I work out a lot, but I was losing that mental desire because I'd done that for 47 years.
Yeah.
It was very repetitious. And because of repetitious, I always still want to do that great job because I don't want people to look at me and say, he should have retired a long time ago. You know, he's just running out the string. But, you know, the Jerry Foley thing was devastating to a lot of us. It was like, wow, you have to appreciate people when they're here. And it was just too much to really go to his memorial. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's just, for some of us, it was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But I have great memories. I only remember positives about people. We shared a lot of laughs, and loyal to me was number one. You're loyal to me, I'm loyal to you, right back 1,000%. And sometimes loyalty is something that disappears. There may be intimate loyalty, but the overall corporate loyalty that was once there is no longer because of a lot of different issues that are going on in the world today.
Yeah.
But back when I started, it was so totally different. You took care of your people.
And I just, one of the things that you said there was that so many of you wanted to cover Jerry's butt. And it's so interesting. Like, and I think of the utilities that I've talked to. And I want to talk to more. I mean, I've talked to a couple behind the scenes, and Brian's been on the show. I want to talk to more of them because the utilities had the same loyalty to the cameraman and to Jerry, of course, as well. But like this team that you all had there was a very, very special team. And it was apparent. It was apparent. You know, I have used this analogy on the show before, but I've never used it with you, so I'll say it. My wife is one of the most amazing cooks you'll ever be served by. And it's because she has an intangible ingredient. She cooks with love. She cooks with care. And it was very clear that show was written with love. It was produced with love. And on the technical side of things, it was clearly created with love. There's no doubt about that. You know, it wasn't a straight ahead thing. It was what can we do to make this that much better? How can we think around the corners to do that? And you guys wanting to be that way for Jerry not out of fear of a boss, but out of respect for the boss, is an incredible thing. And I think it's something that it's worth talking about, because our society doesn't necessarily put the value on that it used to.
Well, we had a tremendous bunch of utility guys: Brian, Dan Campbell, John Moran, and my guy, Stevie Kaufman. And we had a good technical director in Tim Kennedy.
Yeah.
And again, he was our boss on the technical side, great personality. I knew Timmy for years.
Yep.
He always was very respectful of what everybody brought to the table, which motivates the crew. He never talked down to any of us. He kept everybody motivated. And like we had touched on briefly yesterday, with Stevie Kaufman or any utility guy that I've worked with doing handheld, they're the most unappreciated group of individuals around. They don't show up in the box. You get the kudos. Great shot, George. Oh, that was great. Unbelievable. You know, it was unbelievable because Stevie, my utility guy, got me to the position to get that shot.
Yep.
And there were times where a simple little thing, there'll be two guests on the set, which means I'm standing next to camera 3. So Jerry wanted me to shoot next to camera 3, so we have close-ups on both of the guests. Well, prior to them coming out, I'm turning around to mention to Stevie, I'll need my tripod. Tripod's already there, waiting for me. I didn't have to ask. That's anticipation. That's instinct.
Yep.
So I'm walking down to Port Authority, and I got down there, and I said, you know what? I'm going to call Foley up and leave a message on his machine. And I said, Jerry, for what it's worth, I just want to let you know that Stevie Kaufman, his head was always in the game. He had that tripod ready for me. He's always there for me. You may never know that, but I wanted you to know that his head is in the game like the other utilities are. I worked with Brian many times. Same with Brian. He's another guy whose head was always in the game. So I worked with utility guys over the course of my football career where, you know, they're watching a game. Well, they're not there to watch a game. They're there to watch me, to make sure my cable doesn't get caught as I move around a football field. And I tell them, concentrate on me. If I get to a shot, if I do something great, we all get credit. I don't always take all the credit. You know, a lot of times where the utility may screw up and I didn't get a shot, I took the hit for them because I didn't want them to take the hit. But on the Letterman show, because it was always good morale amongst the crew most times, I felt that the utilities need to get the pat on the back. So I left a message with Jerry. The next time I was on the show, I bumped into Kaufman and he thanked me for what I said to Jerry. And I said, well, you know, Stevie, you deserved it, just like any other guys deserve the kudos, because if I didn't tell Jerry, how would he have ever known?
Well,
So
and then there's the other side, because Jerry didn't have to tell Steve that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, Jerry could have just filed that away and said, okay, here's a guy I can count on. Here's a guy I can count on. Okay, good to know. All right, great. And then kept moving on with the other, 10,000 things he had to do that day. But he was able at some point to take the time to tell Steve that. You know, the more you're describing this, George, I really feel like, we talk about shooting sports, and we can use sports analogies, as long as the day is. But at the same time, you all were a team, like a sports team, where you did count on each other, and you were blocking for each other, or you were, lifting each other up, or you're doing things. You guys were a team.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter what show you do, it's always teamwork. And, doing Letterman, it's just a tape show. But no, but it's live on tape. Yep. It's spontaneous. You have to be able to react. If, in the warm-up, sometimes Dave will be talking to somebody, and then he'll make reference to that individual during the show.
Yep.
When I'm on stage, I'm watching who he's referring to and seeing where they're sitting, so that, if he makes reference to that person, boom, we got a shot of it.
It happened
Makes
to me.
Jerry happy.
I don't know if we talked about this. It happened to me. And the moment that it got shot in the New York Times, that's it.
You have to be aware when on stage.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like I say, it happened to me. And I've been trying to, I was just talking with John Moran the other day, and we were going real deep. John and I were. And so this is the moment where Dave and I, this is a month before the show ended, during the Q&A, where it happened to get shot, by the New York Times. The moment I was going back and forth with Dave, and Dave was making fun of me and all that sort of stuff about the salmon jacket that I was wearing, and a few other things. I was asking if Lena was going to be on the last show, or on the, I was being a brat. And so, he was making fun of me and all that sort of stuff. Well, sure enough, Okay, Paul, let's go. Hands the mic, you know, and probably to John. And he comes out, and the first thing that he does is references the salmon or the jacket, the jacket, and then there's the shot of me in the audience. That's the first shot of the show. And I've been
Yep.
trying to look for people who were part of that moment, and I'm looking for the remote, the handheld guy that shot that. That's a that goes all the way back to the NBC days. That's an iconic thing that was part of the Letterman show, where you had guys who had these, or guys or gals who had this instinct to do the stuff like that. That's a hallmark Letterman moment. And it's so funny that you're just so, you don't necessarily realize, you personally don't necessarily realize that you're shooting iconic things at the time, but for you it's just, no, my instincts are just honed and it's just another thing to do.
Sometimes you have to step back and take a deep breath and see where you are and
Yeah.
understand where you're at. Whether you're on the stage at the Ed Sullivan Theater or you're at a football arena or Final Four or whatever, and just take in where you're at and then go about your business. It's like the NBA Finals with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. At the time we're doing it, you don't really realize that was history being made in those finals. When I look back
Yes.
at the YouTube and I see myself kneeling down under the Celtic bench, not the bench, but the basket,
Yep.
it was historic, to do all those things. But at the time, you don't know they're historic. When you
Right.
do the Letterman show, I was essentially doing the Ed Sullivan show X amount of years later.
Yeah.
Same star status, major league stars coming in.
Yep.
And it didn't overwhelm me. I just took it as it came. We all knew what job we had to do, and we just did it. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean,
um
really, it was the icing on my cake because not many sports guys, full-time sports guys, had the opportunity to do Letterman for the 22 years that I was there. So
yeah.
I was very appreciated. Listen, Jerry Foley didn't have to use me. He chose to use me. I served at his pleasure. He could have replaced me in a blink of an eye, but he never did. And I always remembered that. So I gave him 1,000%. Anytime he wanted me, I tried to be there for him because he was always there for me.
Oh, that's amazing. I appreciate that perspective so much. By the way, and we're not finishing necessarily, but I want to do say, I don't like just leaving it to the end. We have one sponsor here at the Letterman podcast, and that sponsor is hello-deli.com. Rupert doesn't own the Deli anymore, but he still does own hello-deli.com, where he is the only guy who is allowed to sell licensed Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. The mugs and shirts and all that sort of stuff. That's Rupert. That was a gift that Dave gave to Rupert on the way out. He said, well, you can have the license to to sell this stuff. And it's coming back around now because it's all vintage now, because the show's been off the air for almost 10 years. And so it's throwback stuff, getting these things. So you can go to hello-deli.com and you can get Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. Now that springboards us over to, you're there for 22 years. One of the things that I used to love when I was in New York, I visited the show a few times, but when I was in New York, even if I wasn't going to the show, many times I would go down 53rd Street just to see what was going on. And it was always so much fun to see, for lack of a better term, the union guys outside or hanging out inside the Hello Deli or anything like that. Do you have any Rupert memories that, I mean, because you would probably have memories of both sides of shooting him, but also seeing Rupert the guy in the deli as well.
Yeah, I'd go in and grab a sandwich. And like I said, normally Tuesday nights was my regular night. And that would be the night we'd go into the Rupert's Deli. And for whatever skit Dave had planned for him that day, Rupert was fine. We had a lot of laughs. You know, I don't really have any bad stories, but he
Oh no, of
was
course not.
always professional, always a lot of laughs. He's a funny guy. I
Yes.
didn't do a lot of the E&G shoots that he and Dave used to go out and
Yep.
do, but they were iconic. And again, he was part of the Letterman history on when they came to the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Yeah, one of the and again, Rupert's good friend, and one of the kind. It's like God took the word kind and made it into a human being. Like, he's just one of the kindest people you'll ever meet. He's such a sweet guy.
And there's a certain sense of innocence with him when he came out on stage, which I think the audiences always appreciated. Much like Dave Dorsett, when he'd do his bits, you see the little kid coming out in him, the simpleness of the responses or the shyness of the responses, which really, turned on the audience to a certain degree. And that's why they came back to him time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. No better ambassador for Late Show than Rupert, and it was so cool. I've said this to him, and I think maybe a couple times on camera here, but there was no better a sidekick. If the Late Show was Batman, there was no better Robin for the Late Show than Rupert, because you had tens of thousands of people who would be coming by. And they wouldn't have tickets to the show, but they would still get a Late Show experience because they got to go hang out and visit with him. And he just seemed to have the patience of, I don't even know, like it was like every single time he met somebody and he heard the same question for the 10,000th time, what's it like to be with the Late Show, or what's Dave like, or whatever. And he would talk to them like it was the first time him hearing the question. He just had, and you said this innocence and the sensibility about him. He was the perfect sidekick for Late Show. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk a little bit about him today. George, I'm super curious if there's any particular either big moments publicly, like some people have talked about McCartney and all, on the roof or on the marquee and different things, or small moments. What are some of the moments that you remember about your time in the 22 years that kind of pop up to the surface when people ask you about Letterman? What are some of those moments that you kind of the cherish, big moments that might have been there? What are some of the ones that come to mind for you?
That's a great question. I was on the shoot when McCartney was there, and that was an exciting day. They had 75% of Broadway blocked off, where only a few cars could go past the marquee and head downtown, and that was quite a day. And I don't know, it was a pretty well balanced. People would always ask me, well, what was Dave like? I don't know, 22 years. I think the most I've ever said to him was, "Hi, how are you?" And that was it. And that wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
I wasn't there to be friends with Dave. My job was just to be a professional camera operator. I got to know Paul a little bit, some band members. Alan Coulter and I were good friends. Rupert G, of course, and Biff Henderson. But, I wasn't there to buddy up, and I don't think Dave really wanted people to play grab ass with him all the time. I think he just wanted to come in and do his thing and get out. I respected that because, I was good friends with John Madden. John had a small circle, and I was fortunate to be accepted by him and good friends with him and Pat Summerall. So I understand Dave had a smaller circle, and I respected that. If Dave wanted to be friends with me and he wanted to talk to me, okay, I'm going to talk to him, but I'm not going to go out of my way. It's just like talent. They didn't want you to schmooze with the talent and whatnot, which I get that. Mm-hmm. So, if talent talked to me, I would be respectful to the talent and talk back to them. But I would never try to initiate a conversation because you just never know when it would backfire. It was the same thing when we were doing a golf tournament.
Yeah.
When we started doing minis out of the fairways, some of us would start talking to the golfers, or the golfers would be talking to us. And I never initiated conversations, but certainly when Greg Norman and Jack Nicklaus would become an affair, if they started talking, I would talk back, and plus our producer, director Frank Chirkinian would ask him, "Oh, yes, Jack this, yes, Fuzzy Zola that." We would do that, but I would never initiate it because that could backfire on you. You could have asked the question at the wrong time, which might have distracted them and whatnot. So I was always very cautious because, when Dave saw me on a shoot, whether I was with him after the show's over for a post-tape or a pre-tape, I just wanted him to know that when he saw me, we were going to get a good job. There's not going to be a lot of grab ass or small talk. We're going to get in and do the job and go home. That's all I ever wanted. But there were other guys who wanted to take it a little bit further. But no, that just wasn't me. As far as highlights, just doing the show for 22 years was a highlight. To be able to, it was a privilege, not a right, to do that show. And to be accepted by Hal Gurney and Jerry Foley, to me, was what a cameraman want. You want to be accepted by your director. We're doing a football game out in San Francisco, and our Hall of Fame director, Bob Fishman, is friends with Francis Ford Coppola. So he invites Francis to come to our camera meeting. Francis, he allowed me to call him Francis. He's sitting next to me, and he's asking me what my role in the show was. Because a film director, everything is blocked. The lighting's measured, the focal length, the depth of field, the whole deal. It's pre-programmed. But on a live sporting event, nothing is pre-programmed. So I was shooting high speed. I'm recording 300 frames per second. Wanted to know what my role was during the show, and I explained everything to him. And later on, I'm thinking to myself, I'm having a conversation with Francis Ford Coppola,
Yeah.
one-on-one, little Georgie Rothweiler. And it doesn't overwhelm me, but I think, well, I'm a very fortunate guy.
Mm-hmm.
So about a week later, my wife says, there's a gentleman who just delivered a case of wine from Francis Ford Coppola. He had his local distributor in New Jersey bring me to my house a case of wine from his winery.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You couldn't have scripted that any better. But these are just the little things. It's like the people you meet, it's just unbelievable. I'd love to work with Francis Ford Coppola if that ever happened, because, he's a director. Is he liked by everybody? No. Like I said, you can't be liked by everybody, but you have to be respectful of one's professional ability.
Yeah.
You're going to have your camera guys who are going to run through a wall for you, and others might not run through that wall for you. And I'm sure Francis was very demanding, but his results are his results. Jerry could be very demanding, and so could Hal. All my sports directors were always demanding.
Yep.
But when it's all said and done, you're part of their deal. You're part of their little family. They'll bring it back the next time because they can go to war with you, and you'll get what they need on tape or on film. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Cameramen are weird people.
Are they?
Well, they are in a way, because, we want to be loved by our directors,
Right.
The camera girls and whatnot. It's like, man, I always told directors, we were at a camera meeting with down in Baltimore, and I said to the director in our camera meeting, I said, Bob, this is the Bob Fishman. My job is to make you a great selector. Well, everybody all the camera people started laughing like, ooh. And Bob knew, because Bob and I worked together for 45 years, and he understood that my job was to make you a great selector, because these sports directors, they can't call every shot on a live event. There's just too much going on. You're listening to the talent upstairs, what they're talking about. You're looking above your camera to see what's going on, because these directors don't know what's going on. You may see a great shot of the special teams coach reaming out one of his players. Well, that could mean something depending on what the talent is talking about. So you're all over the place.
Yep.
And he laughed and he smiled. He said, you're absolutely right. And that's nothing against their directorial abilities. Now with Foley, we go out, he shot this piece, and I only shot a little bit of it with Alan Coulter, the Shawshank Redemption bit.
You shot part of that? Oh, that's iconic. Oh, I love that. Where Alan escapes to the theater.
Oh, that was great. But the thing with that is, Jerry came so prepared, like a film director. He had his storyboard, he had his yellow notepad, he had everything blocked out, pictures, what he wanted. He came prepared. And I always thought, if he's that prepared, I have to be even more prepared to be able to do what he wants at a moment's notice. All right?
Yep.
Come prepared with all the things that you have in your head and your physical ability to get what he wants that he had on that yellow pad.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about him. He came very prepared, like most of my directors have over the years.
Okay, so this is a great question, and I want to ask you about the extras. That's actually one of the things that I did write down. If you went on a lot and shot a lot of extras, but there's a good example of one. Okay, so you've got this is part of the show, this comedy piece, this extra that they've prepared and shot like a mini movie, like everything's written, produced, the whole nine yards. This sketch of Alan Coulter, doing a takeoff of the Shawshank Redemption, escaping the theater. It's iconic. It's fantastic. You go and you shoot these little pieces of, Alan crawling through a sewer or whatever it was that you shot, Alan coming out. Great. Yeah. Nice job, George. Kate, let's go give it to the editors. They're going to go do their thing. Do you watch the final product? Are you you're there on the show, the extra is playing. Are you watching the monitor and watching it happen? Or are you just there for the piece that you did, and that's where you get the satisfaction out of things?
Well, I know after I shot it, it was good. I felt good about it. Because I was traveling so much, I might not always see the piece. Like we did the 50th anniversary of the Beatles one night. It was myself and Al Chilino with Paul and Ringo and Dave, and we moved around the theater.
Yep.
And again, the word was, you don't talk to the talent, but we were up in the balcony, and David questioned him about the sound, how loud it was that first night that they appeared at the theater.
Yeah.
And he says, and Paul said something about the headsets, and he noticed my headset, because I was pretty close to him. the current headsets we had gain control in the top of the earpiece, so you can really bring up the level.
Yep.
And he made reference to my heads and whatnot. Whereas the old days, it just had those little, operator type headsets, and you couldn't really hear a lot of things.
Yep.
I did watch how much they were going to insert what we did into that main show. I just happened to see it. Just I want to see how they put it. It wasn't great camera work, but I just want to see how they edited it in. And if I was able to see stuff, I would. But I will tell you one thing. Since today's 9/11,
Yes. Okay.
we
thank you. Yep.
We won our first Emmy 2001. So, and how I feel, right?
Oh, that night was I mark this occasion by watching the entire show every year. I have the entire show. I have a beautiful version of it, and I watch it every
Well,
year. I'm watching it a little later today. Yeah.
We were flying back that Monday from the Emmys.
Mm-hmm.
We had won that Sunday. We didn't expect to win. When we got to the theater that evening, we were walking in the downstairs, and we went too far. And the usher says, "Can I help you?" And we showed them our tickets. They put our camera crew, in the last row downstairs. You couldn't go any further back. And we were kidding. We saw the mini guys running around because it was being televised.
Yeah.
And I was kidding. I was saying to Dave Dorsett, I said, "Gee, I hope the mini guys have enough cable to reach us when we win." Just kiddingly. Well, when they announced the winner for Best Technical Direction and Camera Work, The Late Show with David Letterman, it was surreal. I had never experienced that before. Walking down the aisle, going up on stage. You're looking down, you see Billy Crystal and all these other stars, and it's like, it's so real. You really don't realize where you're at. You go back, they give you your statues. Now, mind you, that wasn't my first Emmy, but it was the first one for the crew of The Late Show.
Yeah.
We subsequently another one a couple of years later. So getting Emmy wasn't overwhelming. Just the whole scenario of being at this event was cool. And then later on, going to the after party, all the wives were there, so they experienced that high also. And then, of course, when we fly home the next day, the unthinkable happened. So it was kind of like, all right, a high one day and a very low the next day.
Yep.
So it gets a little emotional.
Were you there that night for the 9/11 show?
No.
Okay, you weren't there for that.
They canceled all the football games. So for probably a week, I just sat watching the news, and I'm thinking, I can imagine what Pearl Harbor was like at the time. It didn't have the media coverage that what you saw happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of things go through your mind. It's just it's a horrible thing, and it's just below. I could never go downtown. It would be too much for me.
There's a lot of people who have given me that same sentiment.
Yeah, it's just difficult. So I'm respectful of the people that perished that day, and life, we move on. Hopefully it gets better.
Absolutely. Did you watch the first Late Show back as it happened? You watched it as it happened? And I've said this to many people, over this last couple of years since doing this. I could not be more proud of what you did that night. I mean, you talk about, of course, Dave is the tip of the spear. Just starting the show with just talking to camera. But all of you in what you did, you created something that helped lead the world. I'm Western Canada, just outside Vancouver, and that led me, and it was of course Dave and his eloquence and his brilliance, and that night his emotion, his leadership and the bravery, and in that initial, I don't know if you remember, but in that initial to camera piece at the beginning, he talked about brave and pretending you're brave is the same as being brave, and courage. Use the word courage, and that's what you all were in doing that, because there was no roadmap for something like that. And
No, not
that crew, those people, they all went to work and they put something on that literally led the world. And it was
Dave was Dave was unbelievable. You know, the
yeah,
warmth that he displayed that night
yeah,
and the confidence as he spoke to people. And then I heard a rumor, it's probably true, that he bought the fire company a brand new hook and ladder fire truck, I believe. I don't know if that was ever publicized, but we did hear that in a rumor
yeah.
mill. But
Dave doesn't
that's Dave. I
publicize his
mean,
generosity.
like,
He doesn't publicize that stuff, but yes, he's
no,
extremely
he really,
generous.
it's like I said early on, I didn't know anything about David Letterman before I did the show. But
Mm,
over the years, I thought he did a great interview. He could be sarcastic, he could be really funny, but he could also do a great interview. And I really had a lot of respect for him as time went on. Wish I got
mm,
to know him a little bit better, but from afar, I said, this guy is pretty funny. He had me
mm.
chuckling all the time. And sometimes on camera, you don't want to chuckle because you don't want to distract them either. But, you know, he's quite a guy. And, you know, even his new shows now I watch. I like the way he interviews the celebrities that he's doing. So, you know,
Yeah.
for me personally, it was a great career. I saw so many things and met so many great people and learned so much, things that I would never have learned if I had gone to 4 or 5, 6 years of college. I mean, once you get thrown in the trenches, you know, you learn as you go, man. And hopefully
Yeah.
you don't stub your feet. You build friends and relationships, and hopefully that should carry you. But you have to have the ability. Ability needs to be there.
Um, and you missed one part. You don't just learn as you go, but and I'm saying this about you, George, you teach as you go. Because I mean, you've taught me as we've done this here, and I can just tell that you have iron sharpens iron. And I can tell that you are an amazing piece of iron that would sharpen anybody who would let you sharpen them. And I just you've got this great skill clearly where you like to collaborate and you do like to share the things that you've learned and you do like to make people better. That is a wonderful, wonderful attribute to have as we kind of move this thing to the close. Actually, and you talk about the Emmys too, and as of the time of this recording, just a couple of days ago, David Letterman won his first Emmy in a long, long time. They won for the My Next Guest with John Mulaney.
Yeah.
And congratulations to Dave and his team, Tom Keeney, the whole team, and what they did there. John Mulaney, of course, as well. And it's so cool to see him, in his mid-70s, still going for it. And it's really, really neat to see that. He, you talk about Dorsett, he, shot Cronkite and he shot Letterman. And I mean, these are icons. These are broadcast icons.
You got to
And you're,
remember, I could tell you about Dave Dorsett.
yeah.
He did a lot of the space shots and everything else. The thing about Dave, and I love this man so much. We were doing the NFL championship game in '81 out in San Francisco. It was the game they called the catch when Dwight caught the ball in the end zone.
Mhm.
But prior to that kickoff, it rained and it rained in San Francisco. And, we're in the mud. We do the football game. Once the football game is over, we still have another 2 hours of breaking all the gear down, getting the cables in. And here I am with Dave Dorsett. He was doing the NFL Today show while I was doing the game. We're knee deep in mud, but yet that $1 million smile and his great sense of humor and work ethic was still there, even in the
Oh,
horrible conditions we were in. That was unique about these guys, these first generation technicians. They were hard workers. Man, I learned a lot from them. And like you say, you try to pass it on to the next generation. And my next generation was really the freelance world. And, the things that I learned and might have stubbed my foot on, I try to pass on to the men and women coming in behind me because I don't want them to make the same mistakes. Yeah, everybody's going to stub their feet, but, you learn from your mistakes and you move forward. You fall down, you don't fall backwards. You fall down, you get up, you keep moving forward. All right. You know, I don't linger in the past. I only learn from the past to make my future decisions better as we go. And I think most people try to do that.
God damn, George. It's like you know how to frame a show and you know how to do that figuratively and literally. You know how to frame a show. What a perfect sentiment for us to close. Hopefully this is your first not just your first. Hopefully we have you back on the show again. I cannot thank you for taking time out of your day to talk about some of these things. And please give my best to Dave. I know you talked to Dave Dorsett last night. Please give my best to him and give our best as the Letterman podcast. Give our best to him as well. And thanks. And yeah, I would love to do something with him. But George, I cannot thank you enough for you today. You really, really, I mean, I'm on the West Coast. And so, my day really is beginning in a lot of ways. And what a day to begin with a conversation like this. You really, really have put my perspective in the right place. I cannot thank you enough for this conversation, but I also just want to say on behalf of the legions of us who love this show and who counted on this show every single night, some for the full 32 years that the show was on, some younger people who came on along the way, but we counted on that show. It put us to bed every night, and you were a big part of that. So George, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time today to talk about this, but also thank you so much for all that you've done to create this amazing art that we adore so much. Thank you, man.
Well, I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because I felt for many years that the technicians in the trenches are the ones that really know what's going on the show. We're the foundation that the production people, Worldwide Pants, built off of. We take the good and the bad in the trenches. I was interviewed not too long ago by an individual who was writing a book about John Madden, and I was there from the pre-Madden, the current Madden, and whatnot. So when they called me to get some history about John and how his impact on all the technicians, what that was all about, that's a story we need to share. There's not many of us left from the early years that can talk about the history of the Tiffany Network, whether it be in the entertainment division or the sports division, how it went from 1975 to 2024. What changes were made in that span?
Yeah.
Technically changes, philosophies of producers and directors,
Yep.
everything, corporate, the whole deal. And I like to share those things. And there are many other technicians who have another take on all of this also. So for you to dig in with the technicians, I think is a solid for all of us. And I thank you an awful lot for this opportunity.
Oh, George, absolutely. And anybody that you can think of, because my contact information, some of it was dated, right? So some of these people, it's just been a matter of not being able to get a hold of them. Any of them that you know of that want to, that would be willing to have a conversation with me, maybe just beforehand, on the phone or whatever, or just want to come on the show or both, please let me know. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to shoot a really quick outro and then I'll come back to you. We'll say our goodbye privately. Man,
Sure.
alive. Holy smokes. Where's the view here? There we go. This is a picture perfect example of why we do this show. Today's episode was absolutely a picture perfect example of that. We want to preserve and continue on, talking about the stories in front of the camera, but also, of course, behind the scenes of the greatest body of broadcast work in history, that of David Letterman and company. And again, we may never have Dave on this show, but it's David Letterman and company. Dave was, like we said, the tip of the spear, but the company were people who were all at the highest level. And today, George Rothweiler's stories, his anecdotes, his sharing of his experiences show exactly that. What a picture perfect encapsulation of the company of the greatest body of broadcast work in history, that of David Letterman and company. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.